This is the Roller Coaster Podcast, and I'm your host, Lucy Q. Life is a wild ride. It has twists and turns. It's scary, exciting, and downright fun. So throw your head back, arms in the air, and come along with me for the ride.
Life is like a roller coaster, baby, baby. I wanna ride.
In his book, Seeds of Devotion, Roger Butts explores stories of challenge and resilience. He brings insight and wisdom with reflective prayers and questions to encourage readers to dive into their own stories. Roger is a hospital chaplain, pastor, community organizer who teaches from the Hebrew and New Testaments with guidance from Buddha and Rumi, just to name a few. Roger joins me to chat about his book and how we can rename our stories with a reflective approach. Hi, Roger.
Hello, Lucy. Nice to be with you today.
Nice to meet you too. That's quite a collection of spiritual knowledge that you're sort of bringing together in one place. What inspired you to, look at all of those different thought leaders and sort of summarize it in one place?
Well, I'm a Unitarian Universalist minister. So in my tradition, we're encouraged to find truth and wisdom wherever it comes from. So that's number one. So the fact that Toni Morrison and her book Beloved is one of the chapters. I preached on that first in 2001, 2002, 2000 maybe. And so it's just been a part of my life ever since. So there are some of those chapters, and each of the chapters are short little stories followed by open prayers and reflection questions, as you mentioned. Some of those have been with me and living inside of me, and I've been teaching from for 20 years. Some are COVID stories, and some are chaplain stories because I'm a hospital chaplain, as you said. So I really believe in the idea of having lots of different, I guess you'd call it cloud of witness members gathering with me, because I mean, my favorite bumper sticker is God is too big to fit in one religion. So
yeah, and I think, at least from my own observations and experiences with religion, I think that we get caught up all too often on trying to define and fit everything into a category.
right.
Whereas, I see your approach, you're acknowledging that, there's been a lot of people along the way with important messages. And it's important that we look at them all, listen and understand them, and then draw from them for our own perspective in life.
Exactly. I remember when I was still in seminary in the late 90s, I sat with a woman who was a minister in my tradition, and I said, but how am I supposed to teach somebody who's like pagan? I don't know anything about pagans except they run around naked around bonfires, like she said, first, that may not be entirely true. And second, the goal is to find out what you can learn from them. Right. So I've always kept that with me. It's like, I have my particular view, but I'm enhanced and enriched by somebody who has a completely different view, while not pretending to be Buddhist or Hindu or anything else. I clearly come out of the Christian tradition, but I am eager, thirsty for wisdom from Rumi or the Buddha, or, I have a story about Muhammad in the book. So I'm hungry for that. And I think we'd all be better off by considering ourselves to be friendly with one another's religions as opposed to hostile.
And that's it exactly, is that I find, people are too quick to say that their religion is correct, is right. And therefore that means that everybody else has to be wrong. And I don't think that's the purpose of any of it. In my view, I don't think that's the purpose of any of it. I mean, it's going to be packaged differently.
Right.
But I think it all has value and purpose to it. And I think just before, I think you summed it up nicely when I said to you before that I'm not religious, but I'm very, very spiritual. And your response was, the basis of a religion is to.
Don't be an asshole.
Exactly. And I think it's, people get caught up in trying to be, say, or do something. And it's just a very simple message. Like you said, don't be an asshole. Be the best that you can. Learn from other people.
Yes. So Teresa, I have a picture of Saint Teresa of Avila in front of me at all times in my writing space. Teresa says to enter into the spiritual life, you have to have two ingredients, and this is to enter into a prayerful orientation: self-awareness and humility. And when you're dealing with other religious traditions, that's super important. If I come out of the Christian tradition and I act like my way is the only way and that we've got the answers and everybody else doesn't, first, I've cut off all conversation possibilities, right? And second, I've ignored a lot of Christian history where we got it horribly wrong, right? And so humility is super important. Self-awareness is super important because, and that's why these reflection questions are there. I never ask you to speculate, on what God is definitively. I say, what is your image of God? What is your image of the holy right now? I'm always trying to get people to be self-reflective and self-aware, because then when we encounter the other, politically, theologically, anything else, we have an openness. So one of the chapters is called The Face, and it's about Emmanuel Levinas. And Emmanuel Levinas says that he was a French philosopher, and most of his family was killed in the Holocaust. And he writes that the face is the one thing that can convert us, because that is a revelation of God. And if you meet everybody that you come across as a revelation of God or an image of the holy or the divine, you're going to have a different posture towards that person. Even if you vehemently disagree, and there's nothing wrong with vehemently disagreeing with somebody, but you're going to have a different posture towards that person of trying to understand.
And I think some people get caught up on, the name God.
Yes.
For myself, I find I tried to, for me, I think I'm being more inclusive from my perspective, by keeping it general and referring to the universe.
Yes.
Because ultimately, God is the universe. It is all encompassing.
Right.
And when we look at the universe, we are all connected.
Yes.
And, when we stand back and we realize that, everybody hurts the same, everybody
Yes.
loves the same.
Yes.
We all have the same feelings. We all have the same desires in life. Once you remove all of those labels and you get down to that, then I think you can have more of those meaningful conversations and connect at a different level, because you're seeking to understand the other person rather than trying to prove what you're doing is right.
Exactly. And I try not to get too caught up with how people, what names people use for God, because there's a billion and there's none, right? I mean, there's a billion names for God and there's none. Like our best efforts are wrong, right? So we don't know. But like one of my prayers begins, Prince of Peace, Sister of all, Mother, Father, Parent, God, mystery within, one beyond all. Words fail me, right? Like that's an inclusive Mother Earth, Father Sky, Holy One who loves fiercely, we praise your name, even though we don't know the name, right? So the prayers are always an attempt to invite people in, whatever metaphor they use.
And that's where we begin to have conversations and we begin to bridge some of the gaps.
Right.
Now,
When
in your
somebody says to me like, oh, I pray to the goddess, I'm like, how does, like, tell me about that. What does the goddess look like? What is, or, or I speak with the goddess or whatever somebody might say. Great, tell me about it. I'd love to hear that. That's part of being a chaplain, is not imposing your own shit on somebody else, like letting them speak their truth and remind themselves of their resilience and their strength and their goodness and their beauty and their power and their brokenness and their sadness and their fatigue and all the rest of it. But they have to speak that into that space. And that space becomes holy as a result of that encounter.
And as a hospital chaplain, I'm sure you've had lots of conversations with people that are end of life or sort of potentially at that point.
Yes.
And how
let them, and you just try to, as my wife says, you just try to create, she's a minister too.
okay.
She just says, you just try to create space for whatever happens to happen. And like a dear friend, I found out, just today, a dear friend of mine who's a priest and just the most beautiful human ever, died. He died this morning. I had a chance to pray with him, like, I don't know, 4 days ago. And when he came into the emergency room, and at the end, he said to me, at the end of the prayer, he said, Roger, he was pretty weak, but he said, Roger, either way, I'm free. If I live, I'm free. If I die, I'm free. And I was like, oh, that's so perfect. It's just so beautiful. Most people aren't quite that spiritually and emotionally, mature to say it that way, but everybody says what's super important to them at the end.
That must have been really moving. Either way, I'm free.
Either way, I'm free. I was like, whoa,
I was gonna say,
I love
you. It can take somebody a while, at least, in my own journey, perhaps 5 years ago, I probably wouldn't have understood how much is packed into that simple statement.
That's powerful, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think, that's something that, in a sense we battle with is our own freedom, because we become trapped in our own minds.
Get out of that head.
Get
into that heart.
We get trapped in our own stories, and we get trapped by what we believe is the outcome of our stories.
Yes.
And that's well said. Yeah, and that's something you talk about in your book, is naming your story.
Super important. Super important. The bad stuff, the good stuff, the ways that you're dependent on others, the way that you're free. Telling your story is that first step, naming it. It's what the prophets did in the Hebrew scriptures. And then grieving it, celebrating it, feeling whatever it is that you want to feel. And then imagining the next thing, like given who I am and what I'm about, where am I being called now? Where am I being nudged? Where am I being pushed? What's the next thing? And so that idea of naming grieving, weeping, celebrating, and imagining. And that's the heart of the prophets right there. And that's the heart of living a life, whether it's a societal life or an individual life. That's the heart of it.
And a lot of people can get stuck in their stories when they start telling themselves what they believe to be beliefs about themselves.
That's right.
And the challenge and the gift comes when you can look back at a story or a part of your life with new eyes, new perspective, and reframe it. And that's when you can draw out the gifts and the wisdom and the, oh, that's why that happened.
That's what's going on there.
That's why I'm here today. Because I mean, for myself and my own journey, had I not hit a crisis point and hit my rock bottom, I wouldn't be doing this. I would be
Right.
where I am. So yes, you know, when we have those challenges in our life, they can be overwhelming at the time. But once you grow through them, once you move through them, the gift is being able to look back and see the beauty, even though it was masked in
Despair.
sadness, fear, despair, whatever it may be. Once you get to the heart of it, there's a gift there.
So that's exactly right. You know, I say in the preface to the book, silence is crucial. Naming your experience, a prayerful orientation, and asking the right questions to alight your imagination and compassion. This book is an attempt to get us there. All the stories are an attempt to inflame your heart, to quiet your mind, and help you enter into the great mystery. So that's what we're trying to do. When I left parish ministry after 11 years, I thought I was done. I thought it was over. Like, what am I going to do? Like, who am I if I'm not a senior minister? And what am I supposed to be? And if I hadn't left parish ministry, I wouldn't be a hospital chaplain now. And that's been such a gift and so enriching. If COVID hadn't hit, and all those sad COVID stories that I write about in the book, if COVID hadn't hit, I probably wouldn't have this book, because it gave me the space and the time to write this book. So yeah, reframing is huge.
And asking those important questions to process our difficulties, that's what moves us from the victim mentality to the position of empowerment.
Yes. Yeah. Claim that story and say, you know, for better or worse, this is who I am, and this is what I've done. And man, I wish I had done a few things differently, but I'm not going to stay there. I'm going to learn what I need to learn. I'm going to stay humble and self-aware, and I'm going to walk the next spot. And that's it. You know, you can use whatever metaphors you want to. You can have a paradigm, but the goal is compassion, resilience, strength. If you're stuck in victimhood, then
it's a bad place to be.
It's tough.
Speaking from experience, it's a really, really bad place to be. And unfortunately, you don't know that you're there when you're there.
Correct.
Because, I mean, who or where are we to learn that when we meet these challenges, that you do need to take pause and ask questions instead of immediately reacting and becoming that victim? Where in life are we supposed to learn this? I'm hoping you have an answer because it just struck me. I'm like, well, how do we
Hopefully
learn
you get
about
some nice
this?
teachers, you know?
You
You
know,
get a
there's,
nice teacher or a nice parent or a nice friend.
but it's, you can appreciate why globally we're in this position that we're in. I think I read the other day that over 264 million people suffer from depression globally.
We
So
have to
that's two.
reconnect with we have to reconnect with the earth. We have to reconnect with our spirit. We have to get out of our heads. We have to reimagine what power is, power with instead of power over. I mean, there's so many things. That's another book. That's a
I was
different
going
book.
to say, what do you mean by that, power with instead of power over?
Well, we can imagine a democracy where out of a place of abundance and enoughness, we create systems where nobody is homeless, where people are encouraged to flourish, where everybody who needs it has a job. Some people can't have jobs, but everybody who wants one can have a job. We've set up these policies where we're at each other's throat and competing. That's not the only possibility. But that's another.
But the and the the perspective of competition
Yes.
comes from a lack of abundance or a lack of awareness that abundance is infinite.
Right.
And I definitely think that there is a way forward, that we could all be successful through collaboration, not this competition that we seem to be caught up in. But unfortunately, it seems that every day that passes, this competitive nature just seems to be almost spiraling out of control.
It's weird. Late capitalism is weird. It's like my wife is doing a doctorate in post-colonial feminist theology, and this time period with all the competition and the idea that if you're a billionaire, you've made it and you're smarter than everybody else. I mean, what the fuck is that?
Well, and that's it exactly, is that we all have different definitions of what success is. And I think that's where the fear of competition comes up, is because we are all assuming that you want the same thing out of life that I want. Therefore, we're competing for that thing.
Right.
It's like, no, what I want is completely different than you want. Sure, do I want to expand my media empire and, be a household name? Yes, that's because I want to carry my message and the message of the people that I speak with.
Yes.
Globally.
Right. You want to use your power for good.
Yeah, sure. There will be financial rewards that come with that. Mm-hmm. There's nothing wrong with that.
Nope.
But if I was in the mindset that everybody wanted to do that, then I wouldn't be talking to anybody.
Right. I'll share a little prayer with you. And this is what I think when you say that so many people are depressed, or we're caught in this cycle of violence, we're caught in this cycle of competition. This is the prayer that I write and I think about. In our moments when we feel fragmented, afraid, shattered, lost, remind us that we are one with you, O mysterious Spirit, one with the great flow of love, one with each other, one with the critters and the plants, the stars and the sea. None of us is outside the story of love. None of us is outside grace's embrace. So strengthen us, bind us together, remind us that we come from love, are made for love, and will undoubtedly return to love. Amen.
And that's something that anybody can relate to. And it actually reminded me of that day that I hit a crisis point. I had never felt so lost and alone in my life. And it was in, the moments of complete surrender and calling out to the universe to help me
Yes.
that I'm not going to say very quickly, but it didn't take long for me to feel the most connected that I ever had in my life.
Surrender is a big one. That's yeah.
And I've heard of people telling stories of surrender, but you don't actually understand it until you're looking it in the face.
Oh my God, yes, absolutely. I'll share with you. So this book is Seeds of Devotion: Weekly Contemplations on Faith. It's my first book. I've been in other books as anthologies, but this is my first book. This is a blessing that I really love. So I'll share this with you. May life surprise you today. May a sense of grace come out of nowhere in the middle of your daily tasks. May a sense of peace find you in the unlikeliest of places. May a sense of courage and renewal find you. May God's love surround you. And may a gentleness, a returning quietness, and a restoring stillness be with you now and always. A restorative wholeness is yours to claim and embrace. And may faith, hope, and love be your constant companions. Amen.
Yeah.
That's what the book is like.
Yeah, it's I did have the opportunity to go through a couple of sections, and what I really liked is that you share the story, and then you have those questions, you have the prayer. So it's, I want to call it a complete lesson. It's not, here's a great story, and you're thinking, oh, that'd be really cool, what can I dive into? You actually guide the reader through the process, and you provide the prayer that helps wrap up the lesson and the self-exploration all in one.
Yes. I decided to do that because that's kind of like what monks do and others do when they consider a Bible story or a Bible verse called Lectio Divina, and you just sit with the text, and that's what I tried to fashion it after. But even like my Buddhist friend, who's a retired professor now at the Naval Academy, she said, the questions are always pointed back at your own spirit, your own experience, your own life, and so nobody can answer those questions except you. And in the sharing of those with your friends, that's the beauty of it.
And it's definitely the opportunity, with a book like yours is to create the space to begin those conversations, those important conversations that are lacking in this world.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing. You talked about depression and all that. I mean, how disconnected are we right now? The COVID disconnected us, and competition disconnects us, and the way that we've structured our society. And so, that's the other part of this is it's good for book clubs, it's good for groups, it's good for families. There are different things you can do with it to try to connect with your loved ones.
And that's it. And having these conversations, it can be challenging. I mean, to ask these questions out of the blue can be a little bit challenging. But to have a story like you're presenting is a good stepping point for people.
Yeah, that's the idea. And so like one of the stories is about the time that James Baldwin, who was an African American beautiful writer, gay man, mid to late century, when he realizes he could kill somebody and he realizes he could be killed, he's like, oh man, it's what's going to kill me is not that white mob that's coming after me. What's going to kill me is the hatred that I have in my heart. And if I don't get rid of that, I'm going to die. And so that's one of the stories, it's like, okay, that's tough.
That's an important lesson, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Roger, where is the best place for people to connect with you?
Well, I'm on Facebook, Seeds of Devotion. The book is on Facebook. And I'm Roger Butts on Facebook. The book is available on Amazon and Cokesbury, Barnes and Noble, places where you can get books, it's available. But yeah, I'd say the best place for me, I write on medium.com. Where I write on medium.com is, I think Roger Butts Liberal Christian or something like that. And then, the book is available on Amazon and everywhere you buy your books. I'm happy to connect with anybody.
Perfect. Well, if you are looking at connecting with Roger, make sure you check out the show notes. I am going to have all of his links and his links to his book in there. And Roger, thank you so much for joining me today.
It's been such a pleasure. And here, in the States, we're celebrating or we're acknowledging, Memorial Day for all those who have died in service. And I'm really glad to spend a little bit of that time with you. And I wish you so well on your roller coaster and your ride and all that stuff. Go get them, Lucy.
Thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Roller Coaster Podcast. Want to chat or share your ideas about today's show? Pop me an email at hello@therollercoasterpodcast.com. Don't forget to connect with me on Facebook and Instagram at The Roller Coaster Podcast. Our theme song, Roller Coaster, was performed by The Lucky Setback. Audio editing by the one and only Jeff Quigley of Quigley Creator.
Life is like a roller coaster.